Early. Hello, everybody. This is Cliff Bates, and I am alive now. This is my Friday live stream. I'm here, alive, I think. I'm alive. We're just early, just a little bit early. I sent a notice by people on Twitter saying, hey, we're going to do it. We're live. We're going live. Good morning, everyone in the United States. It's afternoon. It's 5 p.m. Central European time in Warsaw. Actually, not in Warsaw. We're in southern Poland, visiting. You see the mother-in-law's picture. We're staying. My wife's spending time with her mother. We're going to be here a couple weeks. I'm busy. I'll show you. Writing doing the edits and the note referencing and referencing. I have about 2 weeks left before it's due. September 1st. I'll wait to get a nasty email on the first week of September saying, you promised to give us. I'll probably have it done next week. I spent most of the day doing edits today. I was like, oh God, I typing it, and that's and doing the corrections and having all sorts of grief. I hate Word. I'll say this: the best word processing program that I've ever used in my whole life was WordPerfect 5.1. Nothing beats WordPerfect 5.1. Nothing. Current Word is crap. It gives you such grief with problems of fonts. If you're doing editing and things like this, or moving texts and doing things into things, because I often write things and rewrite things and do different versions of different saves to keep them, so I can maybe use them differently. Same material could be used differently for different reasons. I have had problems when you take something old and put it into a file. You take a part of it you want and rewrite it a little bit. Take it, put it in there, and then rewrite it to fit it into the purposes what you're using. It doesn't like it. It doesn't like. It'll say, "Oh no, the fonts are here," and then you have to clear the fonts. It's a frigging nightmare. And particularly shifting fonts and footnote fonts and footnotes go this way, that way. It's like. I miss where you had reveal codes. You go to reveal codes and kill the not necessary code. Can't do that. This is a clear case, right? Microsoft cheated. Reverse engineered Word was basically reverse engineered WordPerfect, honestly. But because it was reverse engineered, they couldn't have reveal codes because that would be too much proof that they were doing it. So they don't do that. They still don't do that because if they ever did it, that would be proof of it. So therefore, the Word has always been a far, far, far inferior product. And I always say, well, what about Google Doc? No, Google Doc it's a pale routine of even Word. I prefer using Word, honestly, because it gives you more control over some things. It's still not as perfect as Word Perfect, and you can't use WordPerfect anymore on most systems. And the later versions of WordPerfect that came up were just too expensive. You had to pay like $1,000 to get access to the file. It became ridiculous. I wish somebody would buy it and put it out there again and screw Microsoft. That's been my writing day. I probably have to. I'll do it I think tomorrow I'll finish it tomorrow, and hopefully my wife will be able to go to a printer. We'll print it out and then spend next week going through it, making sure that the notes, killing certain parts, doing some word counts. Character counts, because I'm on a 50,000 character limit. I think it's 50,000. I hope it's 50,000. I want to. I'm killing. I have to go kill some notes that I'm clearly not using. Going to use it all, so I'm going to have to go through that. So it's a lot of work. It's been a lot of work. I have been thinking about some other things. So it's been busy couple days. We came last Tuesday. No, we came Saturday. We came Saturday. We left Saturday. No, we couldn't leave Saturday. No. We left Monday. We were going to leave on Saturday, but we couldn't because of my doctor visit. And we left Monday. And we came here very late. We got here, and then my wife disappeared for her visit with her friend. They were going to the country because she wanted to see the shooting stars that were going to happen, and that she stayed the whole evening with her friend out in the outlying village where there's no light. This is a small city, so therefore there is too much ambient light here to go see the sky clearly. She went to this country area to see. I was stuck with her mother. And then I spent this week basically doing edits, going through this, editing things, rewriting things, checking things, getting to my stuff. So I've been busy writing week. Also, I've been kind of feeling like, and I've been stuck in in my prison chamber. I talk about this. So therefore, there it is. I'm here. That's here. We're doing. So good day, Friday. I have some comments from my last video. Mr. Corlitz, James, sent something. He wrote two things a couple hours ago. He wrote, one thing about another possible topic is Rhodesia. Well, I don't. Yeah, okay, yeah, Rhodesia and the legacy of liberation wars in Southern Africa. Callum from Lotus Eaters made a travel documentary about the ruins of Rhodesia that came out the other week on his Britannia YouTube channel. It got me thinking of decolonization in Rhodesia and Portuguese Africa and the argument from that era stand today. The history of Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Angola following independence seem to suggest the early idealism of liberations have been misplaced. Okay, yes, that's the problem. I mean, I don't know about decolonization. I mean, Rhodesia is a tough case because one could argue that the English didn't really, the Rhodesians who overcame them were not really ever shaped by English things. Okay, they rejected it completely. So it's not like other Kenya or the English Nigeria or the parts, because you have to distinguish between French Nigeria and English Nigeria. South Africa has a problem because of the Boer and therefore the Dutch tradition, and the Zulus who never saw themselves as, and the intertribal interdifferentiations of different things of the different Africans who dislike each other. So you have I think it's much more complicated in that sense. Western, I don't think we can honestly look at the question of colonization of Southern Africa in any one light, because I think you're seeing multiple tribal warfare structures. You're seeing the role of the English, the Dutch, the Southern French. We can go look up higher. We look at the lower portion of that region of all the hell, everyone but the English, right? You have the French, the Portuguese, not necessarily the Spanish, but the Portuguese, the French, and the Dutch settling to a great degree in those regions, and then the Belgians as well, the Congo, right? All of this shows the problems of colonization had multiple variations. There's a very good book, I think it was Fuller, called The Anti-Imperialist Mind, who made the argument about the different trajectories of colonization. And And there's another book. It's called Against Decolonization. I have to go find it. I have to look at it. I ordered it, Amazon. Amazon, or I ordered it through Amazon, so maybe I have to go find it. Hold on. My account as I talk. That's a new book. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not. Oh, hold on. I apologize. I know the name. It's Against Decolonization. Yeah, against Decolonization. Doug Stroke's book of 2023, Campus Culture Wars and Decline of the West. I think Stokes' book on Against Decolonization is actually good, about the way, in the English context of the decolonizing of the English edition of the British Empire in that sense. America, the thing about America is, you say slavery. Slavery was the big sin in the American. The English was, the idea is colonization. Oh, God. And Stokes is, and the role of decolonization and the post-colonial ideology of critical legal studies and critical studies. That is like critical race theory and critical race theory embracing post-colonialism. Embraces in the English conception of the colonial model. But the problem with colonizing, this is the book that you always have to go. It's useful to go read the migration series, the whole series of migrations by, I think it's a 3 different volumes on the question of migrations that was it Thomas Sowell did in the 1990s or late 1990s. That 3 big, huge volumes about the patterns of migrations, race and ethnicity, race migrations and culture and commerce, that show that the question of who's a what is colonization and what's not colonization, who's a colonist, who is a original population, who's not, because you can argue over time no one is really original. The American Indians themselves were not indigenous towards the North American continent or even South American, the whole American. They came from Asia. They came over the Arctic plains, the Arctic land bridge between Asia and North America, and the population moved down. So therefore, that's one argument. The same thing with the populations of Europe, and the various populations of Europe shifted so many times. So what is original migration? Who's the original population? Who's that? This is a big pain in the ass, right? And Fuller, Fuller's book from 1987, I think it's The Anti-Imperialist Mind. Okay, Imperialist, Louis Fuller, Louis Sfeuer, 1993, Imperialism and the Anti-Imperialist Mind. I remember reading this book when it came out. It was published by the same publisher, a very kind of, it was called Prometheus Books, first edition, 1993. It was 159 pages, so it was not that large. Fuller was a philosopher and social critic. In that sense, he presented a remarkable thesis Fuller regarded imperialism as a natural political process and one that is endemic to all nations under political and social systems. The significant distinction to make is whether a given imperialistic period is progressive or regressive. The greatest historical advances, maintained Fuller, has been made during progressive imperialist eras, such as the Hellenistic Macedonian, the Roman, and the British. Retrogression took place under the Tartar Spanish imperialism. Fuller claims that neo-Marxists are wrong when they cite relative backwardness of colonial peoples and blame the conditions on imperialism of advanced Western nations against the idea of this is the Marxist, the neo-Marxists argue that, the periphery and dependency, the concept of dependency theory, right? And even non-Marx, even though it's dependency theory is like Wallerstein's, who was not technically a Marxist, but it kind of echoes the Marxist perception of this, right? History tells a different tale, as John Stuart Mill demonstrated in the case for India. The actual historic record shows that the British imperialist era was one of the remarkable developments and one that prompted democracy. And to be sure, controversial passage. Fuller asserts that the result of imperialistic interventions differ as a result of predictable ways. Therefore, the relative participatory imperialism that practiced by the United States and Britain achieved positive results, while the authoritarian imperialism of the Soviets often produced regression. He cites the Belgian Congo as a prime example of authoritarian thing. You can get this used, and if you're in America, Amazon has it for like under $20, $16 used. Ship it with however shipping handling is hard. So I would the paperback version is as a hardback available used you can get. My God, the paperback is like 40 pounds. It's republished again. The paperback currently available is Transaction. We published it. Transaction book. It is the longer, September 30th, 1989. It has a new introduction, I suspect. 265 pages, so it is a slightly bigger book. It's an expanded book in that sense. The paperback is a much more expanded book in that sense. And he goes, basically, he expands the argument from the time he wrote it in 96. So and then he looks at the more examples of anti-imperialism examples. So, I mean, if you want to go look at this, I mean, I would look at Fuller's important work as very good. And, these two works are different things, but they do very good an argument about the example of colonialism in that sense and the larger things. And I would also add, what was it? What's his name? Okay, Thomas Sowell. Yeah, I have to do this because if I don't do it, I will fuck up. I'm sorry. I don't want to give people the wrong name. I can't remember everything. I try. I joke. I try to remember everything, but it's hard. Of course, Sowell's 79 Race and Economics, but the book in question is Migrations and Culture, a Worldview, 1996. There's Migrations and Culture, then Conquest and Culture, the International History, 1998. And I think there is, what is it? There's the other one. What is the... Oh, I hate to do this. I hate to go to, Thomas Sowell's website. Okay, Thomas Sowell. Yeah, Thomas Sowell, TSOWELL.com. That's his private website in that sense. Still alive and kicking and hoping to live on. Where it is. what is that? I'm looking at the page. He used to have it on the migration series separately, but I don't think they don't have it anymore. I forget what was the. What was the first? It's 96, 98. Not the quest for cosmic justice. Those are the two big ones. 90 migrations. His migrations and cultures, conquest of this. And I don't want to say conquest of. It's his other book, The Quest of Cosmic Justice, is kind of his other intellectual history trilogy. His Vision of the Anointed and the Conflict of Visions, right? Those are the three for that. But what is the other one? I forget. It's I don't want to say race and culture, but well, those stuff about I don't want to get too much on wasting time going on too much soul, guys. I got Nicholas over here saying hello. Hi there. Right back at you. The Feuer, F-E-U-E-R book, and Stokes are probably two of the big things that I would recommend in that sense to understand and respond to the question of this. And it's a much more complicated question of political development, right? But then I would even pay attention to the development literature. Look at Tilley's own work on political development of Europe. If we look closely at the way Europe developed and the European, go look at even frigging Montesquieu. Go check out my videos on Montesquieu, particularly the long ones, the last books about the Frankish. The Frankish invasion of Western Europe is an example of this, the Germanic invasions, the Germanic tribes invasion over the collapsing or the stagnant Romanized regions of Western Europe, of both Iberia and Gaul, right? And that reformulated and reshaped and recast, redesigned what became of Western Europe. You have to understand political development is messy. This is why, when I studied political development in grad school, I always got in arguments with people because they were told democracy. And they think, it can happen in 20 years or 30 years. And I go, try 500, 600 years. The history of political development is you have to create a society first. You have to create a common people, common entity first. If you just have a bunch of tribes, if you just have people who have localized identity and have no common identity, you're not going to create. It's never. If you don't have a common entity, a good that they share in common, it's going to be never going to be a strong state. So what will happen is you'll have what Weber feared of what would happen would be that the creation of certain. This is the comparative politics scholarship of Africa, is that the Europeans brought their states, right? Their states onto the colonized structures. Well, the state assumes that there's a unitary society. So what happens in development world, once the colonizers left, you didn't have a nation, or the states did not exist in any real society. What happened was various tribal leaders and tribal groups seized control of the state and used it patrimonially in the patrimonial style. And therefore, if you look at the development of Western Europe, was the slow emergence from patrimonial rule as the collapse of Roman Empire, and right from patrimonial rule to the return of civic rule over basically from 3 centuries until the 1200s. It took it 1100, 1200. The emergence of civic constructions in a very paternalistic structure. Okay, but then it reemerged in 1100. Around 1100. Anywhere between 10 to 1050s. No, even earlier. France was a little earlier, 12 or 30. A little earlier, but it's again localized within certain monarchies. The monarchs did it. The monarch achieved it. Certain monarchs and monarch kings achieved it. English was 1066 in that sense, right? The Norman conquest created a centralized entity and a unitary structure that saw itself a very unitary construction in England, at least, right? The creation of England that was wholly understanding, and it took centuries for the English identity to be firmly constructed and an English language emerge out of it. So this is something we have to look at. Political development is a very messy construct, not something so clean cut. This is why go read Tilley's book on the political development of the French state. It's going to be a messy construction, and Africa is going to be just as bad. It's anyone who thinks that there's going to be nicey. The problem with is that once the Europeans left, what you didn't have political leaders to create unitary structures. You just had tribal leaders reasserting it. You had in other words, you had Gemeinschaft, but no Gesellschaft. And the reason why you had no Gesellschaft was that there was no effective. In other words, that localized tribal identities prevented them from valuing the larger structures as a way to, and they could do it, but they refused to have the common that was benefiting each other. They valued their own identity in that sense. Again, this is something that is that's very controversial in what's his name? Not Boeing Alone, but the Boeing Alone guy. Robert Putnam's Scandinavian political studies piece on diversity and the problem of diversity and social trust and social capital. In a larger scale, that there is a sweet spot. There is, in other words, you need a certain level of homogeneity in a society. The society has to be homogeneous to a certain degree. It can't be too excessively. Too excessively, then it will collapse. It won't develop social trust, and it won't develop complexity, and it won't develop social trust. It won't be. It will be actually, if it's 99%, 97, 98%. Homogeneous, they're going to actually be very not trusting of strangers in a certain way. But at the same time, if it's under low 50s, very low 50s and lower, this creates no trust. This creates conflict, stasis. There's no common benefit in this situation. And I think this is something, and therefore you don't have, this is that problem that once you create a society, you get societies that you had social trust in, because in other words, the evolution of the English model, which this is why people like McFarlane's work, Alan McFarlane's work on this shows the uniqueness of the English development, of how the English civic culture developed high levels of social trust and openness to outsiders that other cultures didn't necessarily had a hard time doing. and that this allowed for certain things. In other words, the Romans also were very interesting. Romans, we think of, they are kind of a more brutal version of the English in that sense. Often acted militaristically rather than strictly commercial, but the Romans themselves were a very, in other words, you know, uh, the structure to this, that they had a certain element of, of beneficence. And now, of course, this was often masked by ruthlessness and a brutality of the Romans. But this is the difference. I think there is a big difference. I think the Roman model is much harder to sell. It looks far more brutal than the English model. Okay, but the English model is one of commerce, and the other one's other. And therefore, this is the perception of this. This is the big fight. Okay, but that was Corliss's second posting about Rhodesia, right? His first one was on thanking me for the Kantarovich discussion of last week. He goes, this week I've been reading about sports and physical culture in the interwar France. It seems like there are broad movements across French culture and politics encouraging sports as a means of restoring national virility. I think that's true. I mean, this was, again, I think you have to go look at the naturalists. I mean, that you have to go look at the natural sports. And it's not only in France, but also in England. The amateurs and this whole thing at the end of the 19th century. The end of the 19th century, this tied to the romantic revert to nature, the kind of lead to vitalism. Okay, this is a very thing. Germany. It started in England. This starts in 1830, 1820, 1830 England with the rise of Romanticism and the Romantic movement, and that this does it. But it becomes by the 1850s, 1870s, even 1880s, 1890s, it will become kind of a health movement, a kind of bourgeoisie health movement. In Germany, it goes, again, this is very much a thing of the bourgeoisie. This was not an aristocratic thing. So therefore, you have to understand that if you go look at in Germany, Austria, France, this was not really something the aristocratic classes. Remember, there's not many after the various revolutions and social changes. There's not many remaining really aristocrats and old families that remain. What you have is basically the merging of what left of the old aristocratic classes emerging into these more successful bourgeoisie. And by the bourgeoisie, I mean the commercial classes, the wealthy commercial classes, who take control both French revolutions, right? And therefore, you have a fundamental alteration of the old aristocratic class that is much more kind of. This is the irony. This is why the higher aristocracy becomes the older aristocratic and aristocratic becomes anti-bourgeois, right? This is and this is the influence of the the anti-bourgeois movements of the turn of the 19th century to the and embraced by the left. This is the funny part. You can talk about the neo-Marxist and the Marxist contempt for the bourgeoisie is basically on a par with that of the old aristocratic right in that sense. And what emerged among it was a reaction against the bourgeois. Now this is the problem. We can argue that the fascists aren't aristocrats. They're working class. They're basically working classes and lower class peoples. So therefore, ironically, the fascists have these fascist movements and their hostility to the bourgeois owe their records more to this communist leftist tradition. This is why you have to remember, Mr. Mussolini was a socialist. Okay. Mussolini and even Goebbels, these guys were ultimately old Marxists and understood this. Their embracement of community was shaped by the Marxian misperception of return to community, echoing Rousseau's idea of returning to nature, returning to primitive this primitive natural situation when man is no longer alienated. This is that famous reference in Marx when man will be able to, once after the revolution, after the withering away the state, the worker will only work when he needs to do, and then after a time he gets to do what he wants, right? He gets to go fishing in the afternoon, da 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 da. That famous line, which but the problem is, does he think? Does he, Kojève embraced this line, liked it, and Strauss responded to Kojève saying, "Yeah, but there's no room for philosophy here or thinking about questions. This is that which makes man man or human is missing here." In fact, this is how does this communist man that Marx paints as his ideal, how is he different from Nietzsche's last man? Right? That's Strauss's response to Kojève. Kojève embraced Marx's vision of this man as this ideal point, this authentic sense of community. But this is not an authentic community in that sense for Aristotle or for the classic world or for Strauss in that. Right? Authentic is locality with identity, and community is founded within a certain area. And it is not a universalism. It's not a cosmopolitanism. See, the funny thing is that the Marxists embrace they long for community, but they insist that it's cosmopolitan. That it will be cosmopolitan. That's impossible in that sense. This is the fundamental impossibility. This is what's really wrong with and therefore the work these people, these Marxists, trained thinkers, who are influenced by Sorel and Proudhon and this, who then look at the peasants and look at these things and remember, the peasants are local, are specific class in a specific world in a grounded reality. Okay, and therefore, when they turn to these people, they romanticize these people. They are particularists. So the peasant who becomes revolutionary is not going to be cosmopolitan. I'm sorry, this is the problem. This is the problem. He's localized. It's a localized situation. But at the same time, he doesn't understand. His perception is limited. He's not civic. Peasants are not civic in this way. They don't have a civic identity. They're only the peasants and the patriarchy, the aristocrats, the landed gentry who own them or mourn them are very similar in this way. They share a patrimonialist conception of things in that sense, and whereas the peasants often don't have a family, they have no identity in terms of family because they never had land, they never owned anything, and they never able to step and invest. They never had they never developed proper families by having land and capital to be able to perpetuate themselves. Whereas the aristocrat did; they were the ones who did. In other words, the ones who developed land, possessed it, prospered, versus those who didn't. That became the divide in that sense, right? In that classic perception here. So let me go back. I know I'm doing this. I'm reading him about. Then he says, I see French fascists took this in a certain direction, mixing it with Nietzscheanism and Christianity. That's exactly what they did. This is why it's kind of idea of the revolutionary of the body and this, but I think this is the difference. That I don't think you can call Kendetovitz a fascist in any sense of the word. I don't think he was. I think he was just an anti-communist. He was an anti-communist. He was a soldier. He was a bourgeoisie. He was a cultivated. He believed in German culture. He saw himself as a German culture person. And a nationalist in this sense. We have to remember nationalism also finds its roots in the Germanic tradition. Nationalism is a liberal phenomenon. Oh, what do you mean by that? Oh, it's liberal. It is tied. The origins of nationalism in the German context is the reaction to, and actually Italy as well. It is the reaction against the French Revolution and being governed by the French. Okay. and the idea of longing for it. In other words, it is basically the idea of popular sovereignty, that the people should rule. But the problem is, who's the people? It is my people. Okay, that national. In other words, the liberal conception of popular sovereignty, that sovereign power is rule of the people, leads logically to the problem of, well, what people? Who is my people? And therefore, this leads to ethnic self-determination, right? That my people is my people, and this is that. This is the problem, because the idea of a people is both ethnically constructed and civically constructed. This is the twofold constructions of a nationhood or political community. It can be purely ethnic, arises of an ethnic, but the great political regimes of all times are not, Rome and Athens. You look at the rise of Athens, and even the rise of many of the Greek cities weren't perfectly, strictly speaking, strictly highly homogeneous. There was, in other words, we have to understand what happened. The emergence of the Greek polis happened after a collapse of an imperial system. In other words, that it was something. There was some large imperial empire that something destroyed, either the flood, either the Great Flood, or it just leveled everything. And an empire, probably the Phoenicians, maybe the Phoenician Empire or something. Oh, this is the lost city of Atlantis, right? The Trojan War perception, this idea of this Trojan War, that this great Troy or something larger. Troy is actually late. The Trojan War is really post loss of this, and it's kind of trying to recapture the memories of it and put it in context of this. But this is the problem. The Greek identity and political development of the Greek cities, the polises, is a civic construction, not an ethno-nationalistic construction. This is why but they're limited. The polis was limited. Now, some were purely highly homogeneous, others were not. But the idea was the creation. What mattered was the civic bond that was created by the people living together and sharing a community together, right? Whereas the emergence of the ethnic nations of Europe, were mostly monarchical, emerged out of, again, civic constructions. In other words, it was a monarch who created the people. The peasants had no identity there. All their identity was localized. Most peasants and most people had no idea of the larger, they were just tied to this region, very localized. They had no larger concept. Maybe a tribe, even among large tribes like the Gauls, they never saw themselves such. They'd come together they'd come to band together, but they were not unified in an effective way that they could unify and have authority to fight Rome in that sense. They were still tribal. Tribal leaders were tribal. They had very, very loose, they had the king of the Gallic peoples, but he had no real power over the smaller tribes and the various other tribes, except associational and based on their shared interest and shared mutual pacts and promises with each other. So, if we go look carefully at the way that we understand even identity and national identity, it's a very complex thing. This is why Bernard Yack's book is, what is it? Bernie Yack's, oh God, I'm going to get it again. Amazon. I don't want to use Amazon, but yeah, the nationalism and the moral psychology of community, 2012 book by Cambridge. That is something I would really recommend to understand the way the question of this of nation emerges in a fundamental way. I would strongly recommend it because he does show that 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 at the end of the day, ethnic nationalism and civic nationalism ultimately, the civic nationalism produces the same evolutionary outproduct as ethnic nationalism. Huh? What do you mean by that? I'm saying, once you have intermarriage, shared life, shared values, the value, they intermarry, they interact. What happens is the different ethnicities merge together. Again, that is what I would say is something is what is simply being kind of argued in Eric Kaufman's White Shift in this sense. I know some of my evolutionary ethno-nationalists said, "Oh no, White Shift's and his civic nationalism." And at first, I kind of agreed with them in that sense. But then Yak in his earlier articles convinced me that if we look closely at civic nationalism, it produces over time it does the same thing as ethnic nationalism. It creates an ethnoi. In other words, this is the idea that an ethnoi emerges. That, in other words, this has always been the problem of the Huntingtonian clash of civilization situation, in that so-called cultures or civilizations are not static things. They evolve, they change, they adapt. They're not constant. They adopt and change over time. And they will either prosper, develop, and adapt, or they will die, okay? And the ones who don't adapt, if you're going to stay true and not adapt, you will die. I'm sorry. You will not succeed in a different changing environment that is no longer hostile to you. The question then becomes, how do you adapt and to get benefit? In other words, not adapting to get, adopting in such a way that you prosper or not, that you become destroyed, right? Or become so weak and so useless that you're no longer able to maintain yourself. I don't want to go too far into that, but that's the point about this. And it goes, he'll continue the sports. In other words, he talked about the Christian ideals, the revolution of the body and resurrection of the European body, which increase. See, I think that is the myth. That is the vitalism. That is where vitalism misunderstands that. That real rebirth, spiritual rebirth, is not going to happen by this, body, the vitalism of that situation. I think that's a dead end. I think, in other words, and rebirth of something like a total society of the Middle Ages. There was no such thing as a total society of the Middle Ages. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of the Middle Ages. It's a romantic misunderstanding and in fact, that's why I would even look at Bernard Yack's, Bernard Yack's wonderful book, The Longing for Total Revolution, right? His is very good book in the 1992, The Longing for Total Revolution, Philosophic Sources of Social Discontent from Rousseau to Marx and Nietzsche. This is, and it includes Rousseau, Schiller, and young Hegel, Nietzsche, Marx, and Nietzsche. And that this is a very powerful critique of this longing for this utopia, revolutionary overturning of society, the current structures. And that this is, so this stuff made me think of Controversial and Dante's vision of the King's two bodies. Well, but the Dante, see, this is where I'm not. I think Kontovich misreads Dante. I'm not so. I am not a big fan of Dante, and I don't think Dante's political vision is not necessarily a survivable. It's a dead end. It is the emperor. It is the emperor, the absolute king, the cosmopolitan king. It is what, and in fact, I would even argue that Schmidt's dictatorship in his discussion of the failure of the Austrian, the emperor to you know, in other words, the imperial model is a not a unitary model. It has no sovereign. No, it had what is it? Was that, what is the word Schmidt uses? Jurisdictional, or that there's different jurisdictional entities and things like this that have their identities in this thing that um, um, that really shape the way it happens in that sense. So Dante is going in a weird direction. Demonochaea is not an Italian vision. It's not a national vision. It is a cosmopolitan vision. And therefore, I'm not sure Kondratovich is arguing for a cosmopolitan vision in the king's body, because it's not. How can you have a particular? How can you have that thing? I think that's. And I noticed that in Italian and French fascism, the body of the leader is considered manifest. Yeah, but that's again. This is again. The body of the leader is a product. Remember, these Italian and French fascist traditions come out, and by the Italian fascists, you don't mean Mussolini kind of does it, but he created the cult of the individual. It's charisma. That's one thing. We don't confuse the charismatic construction and then the vitalists coming into this. Evola is a vitalist. Okay, I'm not a big fan of Evola because of his vitalism, and therefore he misunderstands charisma. He misunderstands spirituality, and he misunderstands what's going on in this sense, even tradition. This is why it's that other book by the Vindication of Tradition. And if you want to talk about traditionalists, go look at Pelikan, yes. Yaroslav Pelikan, 1983, 86 published. Yale, I think. The Vindication of Tradition. This is the 1983 Jefferson Lecture on the Humanities. This is Pelikan's wonderful defense of tradition. And Yaroslav Pelikan he is a deeper thinker than Evola. He's a theologian. He understands church history. He understands the broader, his multi-volume history of the church tradition is still a classic in the sense. So, okay, I say, but you're showing your academic things. And Evola is really mad at people. No, Evola is not. I can't hardly read Evola. It's just mumbo jumbo spiritualism of the late 19th century. If you understood the Stephen George circle and these people, you see the kind of repeating of the same themes in those circles that happened in Vienna and things like that. And in many ways, this is why something like reading Vogelin's Authoritarian State is a cure to these things. It's very much a cure to these things. But back to Corlitz's point, he goes, the older traditions and older ideas. No, I think that's a problem. I think that we have to understand these traditions. I think Kondratovich has something useful, but then it gets distracted and gets reread. I think the Dante chapter probably is his weakest. The Dante section is probably his weakest because he's trying to find, he's really trying to find every single reference of Eucharistical construction. But there is two directions of Eucharistical Catholic theory. Catholic theory can go in one direction that's universalistic. In fact, that's the problem with Catholic theory. That's the limitation. In other words, it's not that the authentic Catholic theory Catholic ideas authentically are cosmopolitan. This is why, in many ways, what you need to do is expropriate Catholic ideas and put them in the particular context of people and a nation in a specific particularistic period. This is the ultramontane. This is the ultramontanism is the papacy. What is the other one? I forget the ultramontanism. I always confuse those two. Ultramontanism on papal authority. What is the opposite of ultramontanism? In contrast to Gallicanism, right? Localized, local authority. See, we have to understand that in many ways, the church, the European development of the church localized. And it was in reaction, and the localization led to corruption of certain Christian traditions and certain habits. If you look at the liturgy of the Middle Ages prior to the Council of Trent, there was such very diverse liturgical traditions. And this led to the problems of heresy and doctrines and things like this. That led to the problems of the church, trying, in one sense, to adopt things. And, this is what Luther's reaction, the Protestant Reformation's attempt to find a universal standard that was whole and at the same time, again, respecting of localized traditions in that sense. So it's a very complicated question here. That's why Gallicanism is a very important aspect of that suggestion. The national identity supporters of different things were localized, right? The different parts of the different churches and the way things were. And you have to remember the Spanish church. The only reason why the Spanish court embraced kind of the ultramontanist thing was that they controlled much of they were going to control the papacy. They were going to control by controlling the certain wings of the church. They were going to use the church to achieve certain universal ends. Remember, it's the Spanish crown that it will be the Spanish crown, the Habsburgs, that will become the emperor of the Roman Empire, and therefore try to achieve a restoration of a unitary imperial, the Republic Christianos, right? That vision of the Constantine, this myth of the Middle Ages of this universal church and emperor and church together. Whereas that was, if you go back to Constantine, the church was under the emperor. It was caesaropapism in that sense, right? That's the difference between that. This is the irony. If you look at the history of the early Roman, how Christianity developed in this, the Orthodox, and particularly the Russian Orthodox with their caesaropapism, has much more validity towards what was practiced at the time of Constantine than does the Roman Church and its the Roman and Lutheran traditions of the two kingdoms, of the two spheres, of the two spheres. You can argue the two spheres is a product of post-Roman imperialism collapse. Okay, in other words, the spheres were a attempt of the church and secular authority to kind of, there was no unifying emperor. There's going to be secular authorities and the remnants of the empire through the church that assert their authority. So that's, I talk about that a little bit in my Centrality of the Regime, the third chapter there, about the way the modern state kind of developed out of this, the collapsing of the Roman Empire, right? The collapsing Western European structures and what European identities, emerged out of that structure in that sense. This is what, we talk about these things. Well, that's about it. I didn't have any other things to talk about. I'm on vacation. I responded to James. Mr. Greenglass, I don't think was here today. Mr. Greenglass didn't put anything in there. Maybe he pissed him off. I probably pissed off Mr. Greenglass because I don't know. I'm just kind of a grumpy person, you know. My God, we're four. We need 4 more people to get the 500. So those of you who know people, to encourage them to come visit us, join. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. We're 4 people. 4. Maybe what's going to happen is tomorrow someone's going to drop. Okay, so if we get 5 or 6 people, we will be to the 500 by sure. Even if we get some drops at the middle of the month. Okay, so we're near that magic 500 number, and I said I'd celebrate 500 whenever it happens. So if you like it, hit the like button. Say that, share. Not to share this necessarily, but do share it and bring it to people's attention so that they can come check us out, or check out the channel. The channel is still doing the introduction. I'm doing my introduction to the course I had in politics. The second time I've done the course, so not second time I recorded the course. I've done this many years. So therefore I'm doing that for my break, an August break. I don't know what I'm going to start with next month. So in September, I don't know what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. I'm kind of like, I need to record something. I probably will not record something for the first week of September and just do some small kind of things just to kind of do them. We'll see. If you have any ideas or any suggestions, please leave them either in the questions or the comment sections. I'd appreciate it. And then the other thing you do is you can follow me on social media, links below. The academic social media links are below that. Check out my scholarship and my background and as a scholar and my research. And another thing you do is you want to help me to do what I do, you can do so through becoming a Patreon or Subscribe Star, or you can buy one of my books through your local bookstore, Amazon, or any of the online distributors, or through the publishers themselves. Thank you very much. That's it. This is going to be I'm going to just keep it, I'm going over an hour now. So take care and have a great rest of the day in the United States. And those of us in Europe, good afternoon, good evening. And have a good weekend this weekend. Take care and bye-bye. See you.